January 17th, 1945. The morning fog clings to the shattered trees along the frozen forest edge. The ground is hard with frost, cracking under each cautious step. Smoke from distant artillery drifts through the pines, carrying a metallic tang that lingers on the tongue. Somewhere beyond the mist, engines roar. Heavy, deliberate. German Panthers patrolling the ridge. A lone gunner crouches behind the remnants of a crumbling farmhouse wall, his breath visible in the icy air. In his calloused hands rests a small compass, scratched and dented, its needle trembling as if aware of the danger it now guides. His comrades laugh quietly when they see it. "A toy," they whisper, useless against the hulking steel of Panther armor. Yet he trusts it. Every movement, every calculated angle is guided by that tiny instrument. The forest is alive with tension, the subtle cracking of branches under armored tracks approaching. Somewhere, the first shot will decide everything, and a man with a mere compass might change the course of a battle. The roar grows louder. Shadows of steel loom through the mist, and the moment of reckoning is approaching. By early 1945, the war in Europe had reached a critical phase. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army was pressing westward, liberating towns and villages from German occupation while suffering tremendous losses. To the west, Allied forces had breached the Siegfried Line, pushing into the heart of Germany, encountering fierce resistance from a desperate Wehrmacht defending its homeland. The clash of mechanized units, artillery barrages, and infantry engagements defined the era. A brutal, unrelenting war fought in snow, mud, and shattered cities. Panther tanks had become one of the most feared instruments of this battlefield. Introduced in 1943, the Panzerkampfwagen 5, or Panther, combined heavy armor with a powerful 75mm gun capable of striking enemy tanks at long range. For Allied infantry, these machines were symbols of near invincibility. Their frontal armor could shrug off standard anti-tank rounds, and their speed and maneuverability allowed them to dominate open terrain. Every encounter required careful coordination, observation, and often sheer luck. In smaller skirmishes, where a handful of men faced overwhelming armored firepower, ingenuity often mattered more than brute force. Infantry units relied on portable, anti-tank weapons like the bazooka or Panzerfaust, using the terrain, frozen rivers, forested ridges, ruined buildings, to negate the Panthers' advantages. Commanders drilled soldiers in camouflage, decoys, and ambush tactics, knowing that one misstep could mean annihilation. In this winter of 1945, the forests of eastern Germany offered both sanctuary and danger. Snow-laden branches could mask movement, yet the same snow betrayed tracks, revealing hidden positions to an observant enemy. Villages, reduced to rubble, became improvised strongpoints, where machine guns could be concealed behind walls, and anti-tank teams could lie in wait for unsuspecting crews. Communication remained a challenge. Radios were scarce and small unit. Commanders often depended on messengers or visual signals. In such conditions, even a simple compass could become a lifeline, guiding a soldier through a maze of obstacles under fire. At the tactical level, small gun teams were often assigned to hold choke points, protect flanks, or ambush enemy armor. Their effectiveness depended on observation, timing, and an intimate understanding of terrain. Every engagement was a delicate balance. Too aggressive, and they would be crushed. Too passive, and the enemy would break through. Leaders encouraged improvisation, knowing that formal plans were often impossible to execute amidst chaos. The German forces at this stage of the war were formidable, but stretched thin. Panther units, while powerful, were vulnerable to coordinated infantry attacks and mechanical failures exacerbated by the harsh winter. Allied intelligence noted the tendency of German crews to rely heavily on speed and firepower rather than stealth in forested terrain. For the infantry, success required patience, nerves of steel, and an understanding of both the machine and its crew. In one small sector of the Eastern Front, a particular gunner's unit found itself tasked with holding a ridge overlooking a snow-choked road. The ridge itself was unremarkable, a gentle rise punctuated by ruined farmhouses and skeletal trees. Yet control of it was critical. Enemy reconnaissance had spotted movement, and Panther units were soon expected to advance along the road in force. The gunner in question had trained for this scenario countless times, yet nothing in drills could replicate the dread that filled his stomach as the first metallic thumps of approaching tracks echoed through the valley. Every soldier knew the reputation of the Panther. Stories circulated in the unit. Entire squads wiped out in seconds, tanks impervious to standard anti-tank fire, crews gunned down before they could aim. The psychological weight of facing such machines was almost as formidable as the tanks themselves. Yet, despite the fear, preparations continued. Positions were reinforced, firing angles plotted, and ammunition carefully distributed. Among the team, one man's trust in a small, battered compass became the silent foundation of their hope, a tool that others dismissed, but which would soon prove essential. The battlefield was poised for confrontation. Snow swirled around the ridgeline, wind carrying the scent of wood smoke and oil. Somewhere beyond the forest, the growl of Panther engines heralded the coming clash. It was a test not just of firepower, but of resolve, of timing, and of ingenuity. And in the midst of it, one gunner's seemingly trivial compass would become a pivotal instrument in the struggle to survive. The second half of January 1945 saw the German army in defensive disarray. Panther units, once a symbol of invincibility, were increasingly strained by attrition, fuel shortages, and inexperienced crews hastily thrown together to replace losses. Mechanical failures were common. Engines overheated, tracks jammed in frozen mud, and even minor battlefield damage could render a tank immobile. Still, these machines remained potent, capable of decimating enemy infantry and lighter armored vehicles with chilling efficiency. Allied and Soviet forces, aware of these vulnerabilities, developed specialized tactics to counter them. Ambushes in forested areas, hit-and-run attacks, and carefully plotted fields of fire became standard operating procedures. Infantry teams were trained to exploit the Panther's blind spots, targeting the sides or rear where armor was weaker. Yet executing such maneuvers demanded nerves of steel, precision timing, and, often, improvisation. In many cases, survival depended on observation, intuition, and small tools, a map, a compass, or even landmarks hidden beneath snowdrifts. The ridge where the gunner's unit was stationed exemplified these tactical challenges. A narrow road snaked through the forest, flanked by shattered farmhouses and debris from previous shelling. From the ridge, the team had a commanding view of the road, but the dense trees could conceal approaching armor until it was almost upon them. Snow muffled footsteps, but highlighted tracks, creating a delicate balance between concealment and revelation. Every movement mattered. The smallest miscalculation could alert the enemy. Commanders understood the importance of small unit initiative. Radio communication was limited, and Central Command could rarely intervene in time. This meant that gun teams, reconnaissance scouts, and forward observers were granted a level of autonomy unusual in conventional Army doctrine. Success was measured, not just by firepower but by judgment under pressure, creativity in exploiting terrain, and the courage to act decisively. For the gunner at the center of this story, experience and training converged with instinct. His compass, scuffed and nicked from repeated use, allowed him to measure angles, calculate trajectories, and orient his position relative to the advancing Panthers. To others, it appeared trivial, a relic of training exercises, a toy compared to the fearsome steel beasts approaching. But in conditions where visibility was limited and every second counted, the compass became far more than a tool. It became a lifeline. The Panther crews, for their part, were unaware of the trap forming. Confident in their armor and firepower, they expected the ridge to be a routine pass, perhaps encountering sporadic resistance from infantry with outdated anti-tank weapons. They did not anticipate a team so meticulously prepared, so keenly aware of every contour of the road, every shadow, every potential firing angle. The stage was set for a confrontation that would hinge on precise positioning, split-second decisions, and the quiet utility of a seemingly insignificant instrument. Winter warfare imposed additional challenges. Frostbite, exhaustion, and dwindling supplies weighed on every soldier. Weapons occasionally jammed in the cold. Visibility was limited by fog, falling snow, and drifting smoke from distant skirmishes. Morale was fragile, yet necessity forced action. In these harsh conditions, small innovations could make the difference between life and death. Every calculated step, every disciplined breath, and every observation mattered. The upcoming engagement would test these preparations to their limit. The gunner and his comrades were positioned not just to fire upon approaching Panthers, but to exploit every weakness, anticipate every maneuver, and survive against seemingly overwhelming odds. What might appear to outsiders as an ordinary skirmish would, in reality, become a lesson in precision, ingenuity, and courage under fire. As the first silhouettes of Panther tanks appeared through the mist, the ridge transformed from a frozen landscape into a crucible of strategy and human resolve. The moment of reckoning was near. The gunner at the center of this story was an ordinary soldier shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Winter in Eastern Europe was merciless, and every day in the field demanded endurance beyond physical stamina. It demanded mental fortitude. He had faced freezing nights, relentless artillery barrages, and the constant threat of Panther armor rolling through forested terrain. Yet, the weight of fear never paralyzed him. Instead, it honed his senses, sharpening observation and timing. Each breath of cold air, each crunch of snow underfoot, became a measure of the battlefield itself. To his comrades, he appeared almost calm to a fault, his hands steady even when shells shook the ground. When they saw the small, battered compass in his palm, they laughed quietly, dismissing it as a child's toy, insufficient against the hulking steel of a panther. But laughter was only a superficial reaction. Deep down, they recognized his meticulous attention to detail, his ability to transform simple tools into instruments of survival. The ridge offered a rare combination of visibility and cover, a natural choke point along the snow-covered road. The gunner's unit had studied its contours for weeks, marking sight lines, calculating firing angles, and predicting likely enemy approaches. The Panther's frontal armor was formidable, impervious to most small arms fire, but its sides and rear presented vulnerabilities. The gunner positioned his weapon to exploit these weak points, measuring trajectories with his compass to ensure the first shot would count. Every element of the engagement was choreographed, from the placement of anti-tank mines along concealed tracks to the timing of suppressive fire that would pin down enemy crews. The Panther's approach would be visible just long enough to allow precise targeting. Yet, the timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the tanks could evade. Too late, and the team risked annihilation. The Panther tank was a marvel of German engineering, a synthesis of firepower, armor, and mobility. Its 75mm Co-42 Toi L-70 gun could destroy most Allied armor from hundreds of meters away. Its sloped frontal armor reduced the likelihood of penetration, while its suspension allowed it to maneuver effectively through forests and rough terrain. Yet, as sophisticated as it was, the Panther was not invincible. Its fuel-hungry engine, complex transmission, and sensitivity to rough conditions made it vulnerable to mechanical failure or precise targeting by prepared infantry. In contrast, the gunner relied on a comparatively rudimentary weapon and a simple compass. The juxtaposition of technology highlighted an essential truth of winter warfare. Advanced machinery could be outmatched by ingenuity, preparation, and intimate knowledge of terrain. In the right hands, even a small-caliber weapon could become lethal. The compass, in this scenario, was not just a navigational tool but a weapon multiplier, allowing the gunner to calculate angles with precision unattainable under normal battlefield stress. The unit's commanding officer understood the gravity of the situation. The ridge was strategically crucial, a natural barrier against an advancing Panther detachment. Orders were precise yet allowed autonomy. Each gunner, scout, and infantryman was trusted to make instantaneous decisions. In a landscape dominated by mechanized might, centralized control was impractical. Leadership here meant preparation, delegation, and instilling confidence. The officer emphasized observation and patience. The right moment could decide survival or destruction. His leadership style was quiet but exacting. He ensured that every firing position had calculated escape routes and overlapping fields of fire. Each man was accountable not just to him, but to the soldier beside him. This fostered trust and cohesion, critical under the psychological weight of facing Panther tanks. Morale hinged less on pep talks and more on competence, preparation, and the knowledge that every position had a purpose. The Panther crews approached confident in their superiority. After months of battlefield dominance, these armored units were accustomed to the idea that few obstacles could challenge them. Their training emphasized speed, firepower, and coordination. Their crews relied on doctrine and the technological advantages of their machines. Yet the forests and snow-laden roads were unfamiliar to many of the crews, who had learned to trust open terrain where their guns and armor could dominate. To the Panthers, the ridge appeared to be just another obstacle, a routine patrol, an ordinary sector. What they could not anticipate was the interplay of human ingenuity, tactical forethought, and the silent guidance of a small compass. The machine's sensors and gun sights were unmatched, but they could not measure intuition, patience, or calculation under stress. The approaching crews were about to encounter a reality far removed from their assumptions. In the icy silence before the engagement, the moral dimension weighed heavily. Each soldier understood that a misstep could be fatal. Yet, beyond survival, there was the implicit understanding of purpose. Defending the ridge meant delaying or stopping the enemy, protecting comrades further along the front, and perhaps saving lives through calculated risk. Courage was not blind recklessness. It was disciplined decision-making in a lethal environment. For the gunner, relying on a toy compass was both a moral and practical choice. It symbolized trust in preparation and knowledge over panic or fear. Every calculated measurement, every carefully aimed shot was a moral assertion that human judgment, honed and disciplined, could impose order upon chaos. In this frozen forest, courage was measured not by bravado, but by precision and patience. By the time the first silhouettes of Panther tanks emerged through the mist, all preparations, calculations, and psychological fortitude converged. The stage was set. Every angle, every consideration, every human and mechanical factor aligned for the confrontation that would decide the ridge's fate. The moment of truth was imminent, and the silent compass in the gunner's hands was about to prove its worth. The mist hung low over the ridge as the first Panther appeared, its massive tracks grinding over frozen earth. The gunner's breath formed a steady plume, each exhale measured, each movement precise. He adjusted his weapon's aim using the battered compass, aligning angles with painstaking care. The forest seemed to hold its breath. From the Panther's turret, the German crew scanned the ridge, confident in their approach. The lead tank moved deliberately, its gun swiveled to sweep for obstacles. But the ridge offered concealment. Rubble and skeletal trees masked the gunner's position until he was ready. The first shot was not fired in haste. It was calculated, deliberate. When the gun finally roared, the sound echoed across the frozen valley, startling even the nearby comrades. The shell struck the Panther's side armor with a thunderous impact. Sparks and metal fragments erupted, smoke curling into the winter air. The tank lurched violently, halted by a critical breach in its drivetrain. Inside, the crew scrambled to assess damage. Confusion and alarm etched on their faces. The second Panther, following closely behind, hesitated, sensing the unexpected resistance. The gunner shifted his aim, compass guiding each calculation, and fired again. The shell found its mark, igniting fuel and ammunition within the hull. Flames erupted, consuming the steel behemoth in a fireball that illuminated the foggy forest like a fleeting sunrise. The roar of the blast was deafening, shaking the ground and the nerves of every soldier in the vicinity. The ridge erupted into controlled chaos. Infantry teams coordinated suppressive fire, pinning any additional German infantry attempting to flank the position. Communication, previously limited, now flowed through hand signals and shouted commands. The gunner's focus never wavered. Every shot, every adjustment, relied on instinct and the quiet guidance of the compass. The psychological impact on both sides was immediate. Allied soldiers, who had once doubted the compass's utility, now watched in stunned awe as two Panther tanks were effectively neutralized by a single well-prepared team. Morale surged, the earlier tension replaced by adrenaline and a sense of tactical triumph. Meanwhile, the German units, shaken by the unexpected destruction, slowed their advance. Confidence gave way to caution, and hesitation spread down the line. The Panther crews struggled to regain composure, unsure of the source and location of the precise, devastating fire. Each passing second intensified the gunner's advantage. He remained unseen, mobile, and lethal, the compass in his hands translating calculation into survival. The forest around the ridge seemed transformed. Smoke, fire, and echoes of distant artillery blended with the falling snow, creating a surreal tableau of war. Every sound, every movement, was magnified. The crunch of snow under armored tracks, the crackle of flames, the distant rumble of artillery, each element contributing to a tense, cinematic moment of decisive action. As the gunner prepared for a potential third shot, the remaining German units began to reconsider their approach. The combination of tactical surprise, terrain mastery, and precise targeting had shifted the balance. What might have been an unstoppable advance of Panther armor was now a measured, hesitant movement, dictated by the success of a single soldier and the instrument he trusted above all else. The first confrontation concluded not with a broad, sweeping battle, but with a quiet, horrifying efficiency. Two of the most formidable machines on the battlefield had been reduced to smoldering wrecks. The ridge was held for now, and the human ingenuity, calm under fire, had turned a near-impossible scenario into a fleeting yet decisive victory. The forest seemed to vibrate with tension as the remaining German armor and infantry reassessed the situation. The loss of two Panthers was not merely tactical, it was psychological. Wordlessly, the gunner's unit adjusted positions, ensuring overlapping fields of fire and covering potential flanking routes. Every man moved with precision, guided by the quiet rhythm of training and the frozen compass that had already dictated two perfect strikes. The enemy, shaken, advanced cautiously. The Panthers that remained were slower, their crews constantly scanning for unseen threats. The once confident advance now carried hesitation, micro-adjustments, and frequent halts. The gunners' team exploited this. Each pause became an opportunity to observe, calculate, and, if necessary, strike again. The terrain favored those who understood it intimately, and the ridge had become a deadly trap. Smoke from the destroyed Panthers drifted through the trees, marking a grim lesson in the consequences of overconfidence. The gunner adjusted his sights once more, anticipating the next movement. His mind, calm and methodical, calculated distance, angle, and timing. The forest seemed to compress around him. Every snapping branch, every metallic creak of tank tracks, every shout or alarmed whistle carried significance. Seconds stretched like hours, yet each decision remained grounded in fact, not fear. Meanwhile, German commanders attempted to coordinate a counteraction. Orders were relayed down the line, but the reality on the ground was chaotic. The precise position of the gunners' team remained unknown. Attempts to probe the ridge were met with sporadic, lethal resistance. One tank tried to maneuver to higher ground, but exposed its side armor. Suppressive fire pinned infantry attempting to flank. The ridge had become a fortress of calculated fire, and the initiative rested firmly in the hands of the defenders. As the engagement continued, exhaustion began to press against both sides. Fingers numbed in the cold, breath crystallized in frosty clouds, and the weight of continuous vigilance threatened to overwhelm. Yet the gunner's focus never wavered. Each calculation, each adjustment guided by the compass, remained precise. He was not a hero in legend. He was a soldier relying on preparation, observation, and an unwavering calm. The battlefield demanded nothing less. The culmination of these factors led to a slow but undeniable shift. German momentum stalled completely. Their advance fractured into smaller, hesitant movements. The combination of terrain mastery, meticulous calculation, and psychological pressure created a chokehold without a single frontal assault. In a few hours, a scenario that could have ended in disaster for the defenders was transformed into a controlled victory. By mid-afternoon, the ridge remained in Allied hands. The destruction of the two Panthers had achieved more than material loss for the enemy. It forced reassessment, caution, and retreat. Communications from command noted the unexpected halting of the German advance, attributing it to effective anti-tank engagement and defensive ingenuity. For the soldiers on the ridge, the moment of climax had passed, leaving both relief and exhaustion in its wake. The ridge, once silent and foreboding under morning frost, now bore the marks of sudden violence. Smoke curled from the charred wrecks of the two Panthers, blackened metal twisting against the pale snow. The landscape, though small in scale, told the story of a decisive engagement. The overwhelming power of German armor halted not by numbers, but by precision, preparation, and human ingenuity. Reports filed later described the event with measured astonishment. The gunners' team had achieved what many considered improbable, neutralizing two Panther tanks with limited weaponry and a keen understanding of terrain. The destroyed tanks represented not only a tactical victory, but a symbolic disruption of German confidence. Commanding officers on both sides would cite the ridge in official communiqué, emphasizing its strategic and psychological significance. Casualty figures, fortunately, were minimal for the defending unit. The careful planning and coordination allowed the gunners' team to avoid exposure while delivering effective fire. German losses included the two destroyed Panthers and several injured crewmen, whose accounts later spoke to the shock of encountering unexpected and precise resistance. The battlefield, once a potential scene of disaster, became a testament to preparation and situational awareness. The broader impact extended beyond the immediate ridge. Nearby units, observing the destruction and disruption, adjusted their movements accordingly. Hesitation spread through German formations, altering advance schedules and forcing commanders to reassess routes and engagement strategies. The engagement became a reference point for small unit defensive tactics in forested terrain, demonstrating that superior technology alone could not guarantee victory. Among the soldiers who witnessed the encounter, morale surged. The earlier skepticism about a toy compass transformed into respect for meticulous calculation and disciplined execution. Conversations around foxholes and frozen artillery positions spoke less of luck and more of skill, patience, and courage. The gunners' actions were celebrated quietly, a reminder that individual initiative could influence outcomes even in large-scale mechanized warfare. The ridge itself became a subtle but enduring symbol. Military historians later noted how localized engagements, when conducted with careful planning and awareness of both human and technological factors, could ripple outward, influencing broader strategic considerations. The destruction of the Panthers was not merely an isolated victory. It represented a shift in momentum, however temporary, and underscored the human element in a war increasingly dominated by machines. In the days following the engagement, reports filtered back to higher command detailing the unusual success of the gunners' unit. Military dispatches highlighted the ridge as a case study in small unit effectiveness, emphasizing the importance of observation, terrain mastery, and disciplined coordination. For the enemy, the loss of 2 Panthers and the disruption to their advance forced tactical recalculations. Commanders became increasingly cautious, wary of seemingly minor positions that could conceal well-prepared defenses. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. Allied soldiers found renewed confidence in the value of careful preparation and ingenuity. Tales of the gunner and his toy compass spread quietly through the ranks, reinforcing the notion that individual skill and calm under pressure could tip the scales against technologically superior forces. For the German crews, the encounter introduced doubt. Their previously unquestioned dominance of armored warfare was challenged by a methodical, human-centered defense that exploited vulnerabilities they had assumed negligible. Field reports detailed additional consequences. Nearby infantry units benefited from the delay in German movement, consolidating positions, reinforcing supply lines, and preparing for further assaults. Artillery units adjusted targeting based on observed enemy hesitations. Even reconnaissance teams cited the engagement as a reference for ambush potential in forested terrain, recognizing how a single well-positioned gunner could force hesitation and disrupt broader operations. In personal accounts, the gunners' teammates reflected on the engagement with a mixture of awe and quiet pride. They had witnessed how meticulous planning, precise execution, and trust in preparation transformed a dangerous confrontation into a controlled victory. Their collective effort, amplified by a simple compass, became an enduring example of small unit efficacy against overwhelming odds. Strategically, while the ridge was only one point on a vast battlefield, its defense had ripple effects. German forces were delayed, their advance slowed, and units forced to reroute. These minor adjustments cumulatively influenced operational timing across the sector, illustrating how even localized success could impact larger campaigns. Military analysts later cited the ridge as an example of the importance of decentralized decision-making and initiative in modern warfare. The ridge itself remained scarred, blackened hulls, shattered trees, and churned snow marking the brief but decisive clash. Yet for those who held it, the landscape became a monument to resilience and ingenuity. The battle had proven that preparation, courage, and precise execution could overcome fearsome technology. And while the war continued, the lessons from this engagement, tactical, psychological, and moral, would endure far beyond the frozen forest. In the stillness after the engagement, the ridge stood as a silent testament to human ingenuity under fire. 2 Panther tanks, symbols of technological dominance, had been reduced to smoldering wrecks not by overwhelming numbers, but by calculation, patience, and courage. The gunner's battered compass, dismissed as a mere trinket, had become a lifeline. A reminder that even in an age of mechanized warfare, human skill remained decisive. The encounter illustrates a fundamental truth of combat. Victory is not solely determined by the weight of steel or the caliber of guns. Terrain, preparation, observation, and the ability to act decisively under stress can transform small units into forces capable of shaping larger outcomes. The psychological dimension was equally profound. Fear, confidence, and ingenuity influenced decisions as much as any tactical map or artillery plan. For the soldiers involved, the battle left an indelible mark. Morale was strengthened, trust in one another reinforced, and the understanding of disciplined execution solidified. For historians, it offers a vivid case study in asymmetrical engagement, where limited resources, leveraged intelligently, could achieve results disproportionate to their size. Beyond strategy and tactics, there is a human lesson. Ingenuity, focus, and courage are often the quiet forces that turn the tide. The frozen ridge, scarred by battle yet held by a few determined souls, became a symbol of resilience, a moment where preparation and nerve outweighed technological superiority. As history unfolded, such episodes shaped the broader narrative of World War II, reminding us that even amidst vast armies and towering machines, individual decisions, precise actions, and unwavering focus could leave a lasting imprint. In the end, the story of the gunner and his toy compass is not just a tale of destruction or survival. It is a testament to the enduring power of human resolve in the theater of war. The ridge, quiet once more, whispers of courage measured not in firepower, but in patience, precision, and the indomitable will to act when every second counts.